Welcome, everybody, to the NFL Show on the Greeley Truth Sports Network. I'm your host for the NFL Show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host from the FF Face-Off, the real NFL guru, Anthony Cervino. How you doing, Anthony?
I'm doing great right now, Mike. What about you?
Well, I have never been better because Joe Burrow is going to be my quarterback next year.
No, I'm happy about Mike McCarthy.
Why?
I think he's an upgrade over Garrett.
Why?
I think. What do you mean? Why?
He's the same thing.
No coach outside of Bill Belichick, I believe, has made more playoff appearances than Mike McCarthy. 9-13 seasons.
What's his record?
Who, McCarthy?
Yeah, in the playoff games.
I have to check. But, I mean, you're really splitting hairs because if you're looking for that, it's like you want these teams to hire Bill Belichick, and there's only one Bill Belichick.
No, I don't. I want them to hire people that know how to win football games. It's not Mike McCarthy, not when it matters, because Mike McCarthy is Jason Garrett. I mean, if you want to see a boring-ass offense that by halftime is abandoned to runners and shotgun.
When does Sean Payton win when it matters? 10 years ago.
I've
Sean
never
Payton
said anything
is down
glowing.
that same road as Mike McCarthy.
What have I said something glowing about Sean Payton? All I do know is this. You complained all year about Dak Prescott throwing the ball 40 times, and it's going to happen again because Mike McCarthy will not run the ball. I mean, this is a man who in Green Bay basically killed any chance to win a Super Bowl because he went with Ty Montgomery, a wide receiver, running back for a couple of years instead of going to get one.
I mean, the Cowboys have Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard under contract for the next 4 years minimum,
and
if you're counting Tony Pollard's rookie deal.
And I'm just telling you, the history of Mike McCarthy is to not run the ball.
I mean, and I think that, they're going to probably retain Kellen Moore.
Why?
I mean, they had the league's top offense.
No, they didn't.
Or one of the top.
No, they didn't.
Who? Okay, who?
Who what? I could give you a lot of teams with a better offense than Dallas. Are you going by total yards,
Statistically.
points? Statistically, stats are for losers. I mean, statistically, the Dallas Cowboys have a better offense than the Minnesota Vikings, but they don't. Because they've got a better quarterback, they've got just as good a running back, and they got better wide receivers. I mean, you can give me stats all you want. Give me the stats when they played teams that were good. How high do they rank then? I mean, most of their offensive stats were the first 3 weeks of the season when they played the three worst teams. And I hate to tell you this, but if you want to win a Super Bowl and you want to win your division, you need to have the best coach in your division. And they don't. Doug Peterson's a lot better coach. Doug Peterson's team yesterday, after 8 plays, lost Carson Wentz. And they still had a chance to win a playoff game in the last minute.
I mean, that's more of a testament to the defense than anything else. That defense came out to play. Seattle was a little bit banged up at running back and all over the offense, too.
Yeah, they lost their quarterback. And you know what? Doug Peterson, everybody ripped his defense and his defensive back play for the first 2/3, 3/4 of the season, and it got fixed. I don't see Mike McCarthy do that in Green Bay. I'm not saying Mike McCarthy's a bad coach. I'm just saying if you want to win a Super Bowl.
But who was the general? The general manager, wasn't he the first to go? He was the first one to blame for personnel.
Well, all I know is this. You had a chance to get Greg Roman, who was a run-first coach. He would have been the perfect guy. But instead, Jerry Jones went for the flashier name. That's an issue.
I think what Jerry Jones went for was head coaching experience. And then the Super Bowl experience.
Yeah, and the experience.
There's a video circulating. NFL Network's Tom Pelissero had it out. This is a video or a segment I saw on the NFL Network weeks ago, which made me really want Mike McCarthy, is that he spent this last year all of his time off assembling a coaching staff that includes Jim Haslett and
Oh my
changing
God.
his system.
Jim Haslett's the guy that got fired in Cincinnati because he's not a very good linebacker.
But he's not going to be the head coach.
I know he's going to be the linebackers coach. And you know what? If he was doing that, why wouldn't he get his own offensive coordinator? If I'm going to go in someplace and change the culture, I'm not going to keep the same offensive coordinator, whether he's good or not.
You know, we'll see. Well, we don't know if they're definitely keeping Kellen Moore.
You just said they were.
Huh?
You said they were.
It's not a lock.
You said it like it was. I'm just telling you, Mike McCarthy is soft. Soft don't win. That's all I got. I mean, Mike McCarthy is definitely an upgrade over Jason Garrett because a wet paper bag is an upgrade over Jason Garrett.
I mean, McCarthy in his career, 125, 77 and 2, a 618 win percentage.
Yeah.
10 and 8 in the playoffs, and he had a Super Bowl win.
Yeah. And he plays in a really bad division.
There's not many of these resumes you on the streets. And if Jerry Jones wanted to go with experience, which I do understand, then McCarthy was the logical choice. Yeah. Now, if Minnesota, what I think was the domino effect is we heard about the Garrett firing right at the end of that Minnesota Saints game or right after it. I think what Jerry wanted was Zimmer. And now Zimmer's not going anywhere. I think if Minnesota lost yesterday, there was a chance that Mike Zimmer and the Vikings would have parted ways. Now Zimmer's guaranteed another deal. So after Zimmer, that conclusion came about because no matter what happens in a divisional round, I think Zimmer stays. They went and got McCarthy because McCarthy had interviews in Cleveland. He's had interviews in New York, and he probably had something set up in Carolina.
Yeah, I still think Greg Roman was the better choice. I think that he has experience with a young quarterback, and I think he wants to run the ball first. And I would be afraid to go with a guy that has abandoned the run the way he so often has. And he didn't even try to go get a running back. He just went with the wide receiver running the ball. And he couldn't get along with Aaron Rodgers, which has to be a little disconcerting also.
Yeah, but is Aaron Rodgers, and I like Aaron Rodgers, but is he the easiest guy to get along with?
Well, I don't know. Maybe Aaron Rodgers didn't get along with Mike McCarthy because he didn't think he could win with him. And he couldn't. And I hate to tell you this, but Mike McCarthy's gone, and the Packers are a better football team now. They actually went out, they got a running back, their defense plays now.
Yeah, but they have a new general manager. Mike McCarthy did not have his hands in the personnel.
Okay, so you don't think that if your head coach needs a running back that he's not going to ask for it and get it?
I don't know. I'm not in an NFL front office.
Well, you're not in that NFL front office, which was a mess. I still think he's soft. We'll see, but I don't think you're winning a Super Bowl with him, and I think you're going to watch Philadelphia win the division more years than not. But, all right, let's go ahead and let's go to the playoffs, which, do you think we could ever have playoff games, even with full instant replay, that the officials don't have a hand in deciding? And we'll start off with Philadelphia, Minnesota, because how can that not be a penalty on the play that knocked Carson Wentz out of the game?
Yeah, there was a lot of bad calls and missed calls. In every game, there was at least one significant one, but he drove Wentz into the ground, and that was definitely a penalty.
He should have been thrown out of the game.
That was blatant.
Yeah, and he should not play in this next game. Because I can tell you this, when you watch, let's say, Vontaze Burfict's hit on Antonio Brown back in the playoffs a few years ago when Burfict got suspended for 4 games, this was worse. Because this was actually taking your shoulder in your head and spearing a quarterback in the back of the head. And nothing will be done about it. What they'll do is this, they'll come out and they'll fine him this week. But he shouldn't play this week.
I don't know if the NFL does it.
Well, they might fine him, but the other call that stood out to me was a pass interference in the New Orleans Minnesota game. On the push off.
Oh, in the end zone.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were more in that game too. That wasn't it.
I know. I'm just picking out the big ones because if we picked out every bad call, it would be a 4-hour show.
Does any blame, and, just you can't put it on Doug Peterson, but Howie Roseman for going into this season with Josh McCown as your backup when you have a guy like Carson Wentz with his extensive injury history. And I know you couldn't retain Foles, and their immediate backup, Nate Sudfeld, went down, but wasn't there somebody else that they could have had on the street besides Josh McCown, 40 years old? He was working at ESPN as an analyst.
Yeah, but you know what? There's a lot worse guys. There's a lot worse guys that are NFL backup quarterbacks that aren't as good as Josh McCown.
I think if it could have been somebody a little bit more athletic, if you saw, and Chris Collinsworth pointed it out at the end of the game, I think Josh McCown saw that opening, and he said he thought about when he was 18 and would go hit that hole or score a touchdown, but not realizing he's in a 40-year-old's body, and he's just not that athlete anymore, and that stands out.
Yeah, but the question is, who else would have been available?
I don't know. What about a guy like Josh Johnson?
I could give you an answer.
Kaepernick.
Yeah.
There you go.
Colin Kaepernick, no matter what you think of him, might have been able to win him that football game yesterday. And if you look at the injuries they sustained and how hard they fought all year and what they did yesterday to still have a chance, even with Josh McCown, to win the game, I think it's a testament that Doug Peterson is tough and his teams are just like him.
Yeah, his teams are definitely tough, and I like Doug Peterson a lot more now because of that run, because it really was the halftime of that Giants game that changed the rest of the Philadelphia Eagles season.
Well, and remember this. They lost their starting quarterback a couple years ago and still won the Super Bowl. That's toughness. Nick Foles, as we've seen, is different when he's not with Doug Peterson. Or Doug Peterson's team.
Yeah, he's different outside of Philadelphia.
Yeah. And
for whatever the reason.
Maybe it's because there's a different coach in Jacksonville who's not the same as Doug Peterson. Because a lot of this is just confidence and how much you believe in a certain thing. And I think it's got something to do with it. He goes to Jeff this year and he sucked.
Is Nick Foles with this team? Was he going to do what Carson Wentz did?
What do you mean, this year? No,
I
Carson Wentz
Foles did in 2017.
Carson Wentz.
But could Foles dig them out of this hole with no wide receivers?
No. They wouldn't have made the playoffs. But I'll tell you this. When you look at 2017, can you really tell me, since at the time they were, 10-2 or 11-2, can you really tell me that Carson Wentz wouldn't have won them that Super Bowl?
No, I don't think. I think Carson Wentz would have won that Super Bowl.
Yeah. So, Carson Wentz is a really good quarterback. He doesn't have the players around him. And the other thing we saw is this. DK Metcalf, I think, is rounding into a big-time deep threat for Seattle. And with that being said, I think I've changed my mind on Seattle. I think they are a Super Bowl contender because nobody throws the deep ball better than Russell Wilson. And even with limited running backs going into Green Bay, I think he can get this done again.
That pass to solidify the game, I watched it a few times. DK Metcalf was fantastic. Russell Wilson was fantastic. DK Metcalf he's overshadowing Tyler Lockett right now, and I think Metcalf might be the top receiver on the team because Lockett in his career, he's always been a big play threat, very efficient. But DK Metcalf is more of that possession receiver, and he can also burn you deep. And he might not run a perfect route tree, and he might have tanked the agility score at the combine, which, people were very up in the air about DK Metcalf. But, I mean, he crushed it everywhere else. This is a player, 99th percentile 40-yard dash, 99th percentile speed score, 97th burst, 91st catch radius, and 4th percentile agility score. When you look at everything else, it's hard to overcome. I mean, it's hard to not eventually break out.
Yeah, but there's been a ton of guys like that don't break out because you still got to be able to run a route right, and you got to be able to catch the ball. And I think those were the big questions on Metcalf coming into the NFL. And I think what we've seen this year is him progress at a higher rate than most guys do. And when you put that talent with the ability to learn to run the routes, even if he can't run the routes, if he could just run the deep route with Russell Wilson throwing the ball, I think they're extremely dangerous.
Yeah, and then there's going to be a time where Tyler Lockett does get going.
Yeah,
so this offense could potentially, get back on track because it hasn't been on track since Chris Carson's injury.
Well, and I think you have to question what would happen if Pete Carroll would just take the reins off and let Russell Wilson just throw the ball 35, 40 times and throw the ball down the field deep.
Now, Seattle, they have Green Bay this week, right?
Yeah.
That'll be an interesting game.
Well, they're all interesting, as we found out this weekend. But I think if they let Russell Wilson loose, if I'm the Green Bay Packers, you better be up by more than a touchdown with 5 minutes left in the game, or he'll get you. But the concern has to be with Seattle and the lack of any running game at all. Travis Homer, whatever his name is, 11 carries for 12 yards. Marshawn Lynch, 6 for 7. It's going to be hard to continue to win in the playoffs without being able to run the ball.
No, but that was a very, very good Eagles front seven. They should have a much easier time going up against Green Bay, who had one of the worst run defenses in the league.
Yeah, but even with that's the thing that worries me here, though, because Seattle doesn't have any running backs. I mean, you've got an old Marshawn Lynch that hasn't played in a year, really. He's played the last couple weeks. You got the other kid who's nothing great. That's what worries me there. Because even if Green Bay can't stop the run, I'm betting they can probably stop Seattle's run. But I don't know. The other thing I would like to bring up is on my home field advantage rant, 3 out of 4 home teams lost this last weekend.
Yeah.
But, all right, let's go to the Minnesota-New Orleans game, because my question now is this, and I know you've got the question too. Are Drew Brees and Sean Payton overrated?
I really dug into this a little bit last night on Drew Brees and Sean Payton, mostly Brees in the playoffs, and his postseason statistics are just as good as his peak regular season statistics.
Yeah, but they're
not.
So
he's a very good postseason quarterback, but
he's
in the
terrible.
past couple of years, call it what you will, bad luck with the Minnesota Miracle, you had the blown call, but in yesterday's game, and you can go back to last year's games too, because I remember he was underthrowing Michael Thomas, and yesterday his accuracy wasn't his normal Drew Brees-like accuracy. You know, if people want to talk about Drew Brees as one of the best of all time, and he is, and be this great winner, he's only had, people are down on Aaron Rodgers because he hasn't won a Super Bowl in 10 years. Neither has Drew Brees.
Yeah, and actually, it's been longer for Rodgers by a year then. But the thing that stands out to me is the 26 for 33 looks all right. is to 208 total passing yards. And the only stat that matters to me is in the playoffs, he's 8-8, and he's lost his last three, two of them at home, and all three on pretty much the final play of the game.
I mean, he had 2 turnovers yesterday. The Saints were one of the best teams, if not the best, in turnovers. They didn't turn the ball over, 7 or 8 times all season. Drew Brees hasn't thrown a pick in 5 or 6 games, throws a pick yesterday. Drew Brees has not lost a fumble all season and lost one yesterday. Yeah, this is on Drew Brees.
That fumble was huge.
And I said this to you off air last night. Does Sean Payton not trust Drew Brees? Because I understand Taysom Hill is a weapon, but it almost seemed like for an entire drive, Taysom Hill was the quarterback.
Well, how about this? I think Taysom Hill is the heir apparent to Drew Brees.
Him or Teddy?
No, it's Taysom Hill. Because I don't think Drew Brees is going to retire, so Teddy's going to go elsewhere. I think if the New Orleans Saints had any brains at all, they would tell Drew Brees it's time to go, and they would just make Teddy Bridgewater the quarterback. This is played out. It's played out in New Orleans. I think they've had 3 shots. They've come up short all 3 times, and the problem is if you wait too long and you lose Teddy Bridgewater, you're stuck with no quarterback, and you're going to roll with Taysom Hill, which maybe it works because, he plays like Lamar Jackson. But I'm still claiming that in the end, the Lamar Jackson way of playing football will not have longevity. And I don't think it will for Taysom Hill either. It's great to be exciting in a regular season. Let's see what happens in the playoffs.
I mean, we'll get those answers next week from Lamar Jackson.
Well, I don't know if we'll get them next week or the week after that, or 3 years from now. But longevity-wise, we're not going to have that answer for 3 or 4 years. Because, the 46 Bears defense was awesome for a year or two until everybody figured it out. But I just think if the New Orleans Saints were smart, they would name Teddy Bridgewater their quarterback. They'd give him a big contract and try to roll from there. Because I don't see it with Brees anymore. And I can also tell you this. There was a lot of 49er fans that were celebrating because the Saints were dead. But I think this Vikings team is very dangerous with Cook and Madison running the ball and Diggs and Thielen catching it and Kirk Cousins throwing it. I think the Minnesota Vikings are a big-time Super Bowl contender. And I'll even go as far to say I think the winner of Minnesota-San Francisco is going to the Super Bowl.
I mean, you can definitely make that case because Green Bay, they just don't look like they don't match up with their record. And Seattle, they do have a lot of injuries, but then there's also Russell Wilson. But on the other side, the Vikings are the healthiest they've been, especially with Thielen and Cook all season since or at least earlier in the season. And the 49ers are getting Quan Alexander and who's the other, D Fort?
Yeah.
They're getting those players back, so it really should be one of those 2 teams.
Yeah, I think it will. I think that is kind of the de facto NFC Championship game. Now, I will throw in Russell Wilson plays for Seattle, so I wouldn't count them out. Aaron Rodgers plays for Green Bay. I would count them out because Russell Wilson is better than Aaron Rodgers right now, I think. And I think always he was better. All right, let's go ahead and look at the AFC, where the Buffalo Bills, for a little while, look like the real deal, up 16-0. But there's 2 guys in Houston, one named Deshaun Watson and the other one named J.J. Watt, who both look like Superman in this game in the second half, Anthony.
Yeah, J.J. Watt, he wasn't even expected to play. Then he came out. It was activated from IR. He was supposed to play sporadically, and he did. But when it mattered the most at the end, J.J. Watt made the plays to change the game. Yeah. And Deshaun Watson, I was starting to question him, especially early in that game, and then Deshaun Watson really put the game on his back.
And that's what he does. He kind of like the Russell Wilson here. I don't think he's got the weapons around him enough to be able to win a Super Bowl. but I'm never going to bet against him. And, where do they go next? They go to Kansas City. I think they've already beaten Kansas City this year, too, in Kansas City.
And they're getting Will Fuller back.
Yeah.
Expected to get Will Fuller back.
Yeah. So I think this is a really dangerous game for Kansas City. We go to Buffalo. I know they got some poor officiating calls that went against them. Josh Allen, first half looked good. Second half, he looked like a 5-year-old who had his milk money stole by a big 12-year-old, and he was looking to get the hell out of there. I thought the biggest reason for that was outside of that first drive. I thought the play calling was terrible for Buffalo.
Yeah, it really was. I think we should have seen a little bit more of Cole Beasley, but that could have been more of a testament to the coverage by the Texans. But their secondary hasn't exactly been the greatest this year. But Cole Beasley should have been a little bit more involved. John Brown made a couple of plays. Duke Williams was almost that unsung hero for that game because he was extending drives. I think he was an undrafted player or a late-round player that Josh Allen just seems to click with. But you said it, Josh Allen just looked overmatched mentally in this game, like he wasn't ready for it.
Yeah, and my biggest thing was Devin Singletary only carried the ball 13 times for 58 yards, 4.5 yards per carry. He should have had the ball more than that. And Frank Gore, 8 carries, 22 yards. Those 8 carries should have went to Devin Singletary. I think Devin Singletary could be a stud in this league, and I think he should have been used more. Because you ended up with Josh Allen throwing the ball 46 times. You're not winning with Josh Allen throwing the ball 46 times.
No, and Singletary, he's explosive, more explosive than Gore. He can catch passes. It was just very, very puzzling, the whole game for Buffalo. And at the end, Josh Allen did, he made a couple of nice throws, a couple of nice plays. And it made you think he's going to bring them back.
Well, I think this. In the end, I think Josh Allen has improved a lot this year, so I'm not going to trash him too much. I think the biggest problem here is they just need 1 or 2 more weapons for him on offense because, maybe he looked that way because nobody was getting open, which makes it real tough to play quarterback.
Can the Buffalo Bills, do you think they're for real?
Yeah, I do. I think they are a couple offensive weapons away, and if they can keep everybody else they've got, I think they're a Super Bowl contender and could win the AFC East next year. Now, Josh Allen and the way he played in that fourth quarter would worry me some, but it's also the first time. I remember Peyton Manning getting manhandled 40-0 in his second playoff game against the Jets in a wild card. And I also remember him choking away a home field advantage against the Tennessee Titans the first time in a playoff. So I'm not going to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater here. So I'll wait and see because I think Josh Allen is a lot better right now than he was last year at this time. And with that same kind of improvement, 1 more weapon, I mean, this team has got a legit running game. They've got a legit head coach. They need a couple receivers. That defense is really good, so I don't see why they're not a contender going forward.
Yeah, they're definitely a team that looks like they're going in the right direction, but that whole AFC East I expect to be competitive next year.
Yeah, and you've got the New England Patriots, who lost 20-13. Are the Patriots dead? Is the dynasty over, Anthony?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think so because I don't see Tom Brady returning. I think that's over. I think Brady will be playing for another team, maybe the Los Angeles Chargers next year. And I think Bill Belichick. I'm not saying he's not going to have a competitive team, but I think there's going to be some growing pains in the transition.
I don't think this is done yet.
I mean, Josh McDaniels could potentially take the Cleveland job or Carolina.
And that would help New England immensely. I don't like McDaniels either. But I think as long as Belichick's there, I mean, a dynasty, if they make it to the divisional playoffs next year and win the Super Bowl the year after, the dynasty never really died, right?
Yeah, you make a good point.
And the thing is this, if Josh Gordon and Antonio Brown weren't complete morons, this team probably would have won the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah,
But
I think more so Antonio Brown.
but I also think this. I think that there were some decisions here, like Mohamed Sanu, that were not great decisions. N'Keal Harry being drafted in the first round, I don't think it was a great decision. So a lot of the reasons that they had to go with Antonio Brown and Josh Gordon were the fact that they've screwed up some draft picks, especially at the wide receiver position over the last few years.
I I don't know.
So, and I can tell you this: the Tennessee Titans, I really like Vrabel. I think the highlight of the weekend was Vrabel using that 5 minute clock thing against Bill Belichick while Belichick freaked out because I remember Belichick doing that to the Jets this past year, and then Belichick standing over there and chuckling while the Jets coach got pissed. And it was actually, even though I like Belichick, it was really funny to watch Vrabel use it against him.
That was great. That little chess match they had at the end of the game.
Yeah, and I really like Vrabel.
I mean, that was really exciting to watch.
Yeah, and I really like Vrabel. Derrick Henry, 182 yards rushing. And there's a lot to be said to me for a coach that doesn't go away from what works until it gets stopped. Ryan Tannehill, 8 for 15, 72 yards and a touchdown. Doesn't really matter, though, when your defense plays as well as his does. And Derrick Henry ran for 182 yards on 34 carries. Tennessee's going to go to Baltimore. And Tennessee is a very tough, physical football team. And Tennessee can beat Baltimore, Anthony.
Oh, I really do think so. If you can get Derrick Henry going like you did last week and like he's been since Ryan Tannehill took over, then Lamar Jackson and that offense is going to be off the field.
Well, and how about this? If Lamar Jackson and that offense are off the field, and all of a sudden you're in the middle of the second quarter and you're down 10-0 or 14-0, and then the Ravens kind of have to get out of what they're doing and throw the ball more, I think then you'll find out how good Lamar Jackson is.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Because I don't think that Lamar Jackson's an accurate passer enough to have to throw the ball 40 times and then be able to win the game. Could be wrong, but that's what I think there. So when you look at these games coming up, which of the 4 games do you look forward the most to?
I think the one I'm looking forward the most, the AFC games are a little bit more intriguing for me than the NFC games. I think Baltimore, Tennessee.
Yeah, I think that in the San Francisco,
It
Minnesota.
just seems like both of the AFC matchups, those teams match up really well.
Yeah, but I think the San Francisco, Minnesota is too. The Seattle and Green Bay, it's kind of intriguing, but not that much. I don't even put it like this.
I mean, again, I think that you can. They're all going to be exciting games in their own way.
Yeah, I think they all will. I think they'll all be close games. And since they're close, just looking at it right now without thinking too hard about it or seeing who's healthy and who's not, I think I would favor Russell Wilson to go into Green Bay and win.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's impossible.
I mean, I think it's more possible than not, to tell you the truth. And I'm a toss-up with this, but I kind of lean towards Minnesota.
It's gonna. I'll be back and forth all week.
Yeah, me too. Okay. But I mean, to me, that's that close. And when you look at the AFC side, I really like Tennessee. And I like Houston just because of Deshaun Watson. Now, I don't think that'll be my picks by the time we get to this weekend. But it would shock me if I'm not picking Tennessee. I like the way Tennessee plays. I like their head coach. It's the same thing I said at the start of the year. I think if they'd have started Tannehill from game 1, I don't even think they would have played this last weekend. And I think they would have been a 1 or a 2 seed. And I can't prove that I said
agree.
that.
We both like Tannehill from the start.
Yeah, and when you look at it, I think if Tannehill would have played the whole year, they'd be sitting at 12-4 right now. They'd beat a 2 seed. They wouldn't have to deal with Baltimore until the next week. And I think there is huge intrigue here because we don't know how Lamar Jackson and that team is going to fare when it comes playoff time. And, you know, in the regular season, if you fall behind, it's not as big a deal as when you do it in the playoffs. So, you know, it's a lot easier to stay with the run and try to get back in the game. But you kind of panic when things fall apart in the playoff game and it's one and done. So it's interesting to me to see what happens there. Now, I think Lamar Jackson's in really good hands with Greg Roman and John Harbaugh controlling that. So I think that will be a close, low-scoring game. Houston and Kansas City, I think you're going to see like a 34-30 game.
Now, are we going to break down? We'll obviously break down these games later in the week, right?
Yeah, I'm just giving my initial thoughts because I think really with all four of these games, I could see picking either team, and I could see a good reason for picking either team. If you know what I mean.
No, I do. I feel like it's just going to be like Wildcard Weekend all over again.
Hopefully. Championship games, I mean, as long as Green Bay is not involved, I think those two games will be close too. I'm not big on Matt LaFleur either. But also it tells me that Aaron Rodgers is pretty good because the coaches I don't like, he keeps winning with. So he just can't get to the top with them. Because I think if you stuck Doug Peterson or John Harbaugh with Aaron Rodgers, he'd have 4 or 5 Super Bowl rings right now, and he'd be up there with Brady and Montana.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that.
So I that's why I don't like the Mike McCarthy thing, because I think Mike McCarthy has relegated Aaron Rodgers to somewhere between 4 and 8 on all-time quarterback list, where if he'd have been a better coach, I think Aaron Rodgers would have had a shot to be in the top 3. But that's my worry. But if he gets Dak Prescott to somewhere between 4 and 8, he'll be all right then. But anything else you want to discuss before we wrap it up?
No, I think we've just about covered everything.
All right. You want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at The Real NFL Guru, and you can follow my show at the FF Face Off. We can be found at all the top social media and podcast platforms. All
right, guys. So you can find me, as always, at The Grueling Truth. Make sure you check out thegruelingtruth.com. Check out On This Day, which today is January the 6th, 1980 to 1979 AFC Championship game with the controversial Mel Renfro touchdown, or Mike Renfro, touchdown or not a touchdown. Interesting take on that. Make sure you check that out. And in about an hour and a half, me and Ken Sterling will be on with the Indiana Basketball Weekly Show to review Indiana's butt whooping at Maryland. But for now, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. You can find us anywhere you find podcasts, including iHeart, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube. For now, for Anthony Cervino, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.